Well, I'm going to go ahead because we do want to be prompt to start the meeting on time. I know that other counselors might be participating in the PIP. So I want to call this meeting to order. This is the Ways and Means Committee of the Greenfield City Council. Today is Tuesday, February 15th, 2022. It is 5:32 p.m. This meeting is being recorded by the Ways and Means Committee. If any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify the chairperson at this time. Okay. We will do a roll call. I'll do the roll call. Councillor Jarvis.
Here.
Councillor Toronzo.
Here.
Councillor Healy. Councillor DeSorga.
Here.
Hi, Jenny. Thanks for joining us. And I am Councillor Forgy, so we do have a quorum. I would ask for approval of the minutes, January 18th, 2022. May I have a motion, please?
Moved.
Who moved? Okay, thank you, Mike. I need a second.
Jarvis.
Thank you. All in favor? Please indicate by raising your hand, saying aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Minutes are approved. We have no public hearing tonight. We do have one motion, and let me see here. Councillor Jarvis, could you read the motion for us, please?
I will. Order number FY 22-086. The City Council, upon recommendation of Mayor Wiedengarter, in order to rescind the borrowing authorities, order that upon recommendation of the mayor, the following borrowing authority totaling $350,000 be rescinded. Purpose: skate park. Date of vote: 4/21/21. ART number 21. That should be that stands for article, I believe. 21-073. Amount authorized 350,000. My God, numbers today. Amount 0. Unissued 3/21/31/21. 350,000. Total unissued $350,000. The rationalization on this is on the bottom. Majority vote required.
Thank you.
Wow, did I stumble through that?
That's okay. We're all having that kind of a day today, I think. So
it's anyhow, a Monday on a Tuesday.
Yeah. Oh. All right. For those new members of our Ways and Means Committee, when the rationale is that when the skate park was first came up and we had to vote whether or not to go after the grant for the skate park, and Liz can correct me here if I'm wrong, but we had to make a commitment that we would put half of the grant forward. So we did that. And this, and as you can see, it was done in April of 21. So we put the authority for the borrowing in place. Then in our December meeting, we had received, we had to do another, just because of the way the grant was written, we had to do a whole nother borrowing piece that included the $350,000 that was originally allocated in the authorization. So now we've already voted that skate park project is a go, and now we have to rescind the original article. So that is what the vote is about. Is there any discussion on this? This is business. Okay, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, please indicate by aye. Raise your hands.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. This is where we usually entertain public comments on anything financial. Anybody out there? I don't see anybody. Okay. So we will continue on to section 7, which is our discussions. At our last meeting, we actually invited our 2 elected assessors, Joe Ruggieri and Jim Geisman, to be with us to talk about split tax rates. Where do we start? How do we have these conversations? And where do we go from here? This will be a part of our regular meeting until we understand fully what is expected of us. That's the council, our recommendation to the council, when it comes to set a tax rate in November. Prior to the meeting this evening, Assessor Geisman sent us some paperwork that I think is very helpful. And I believe he would like to do a presentation this evening of the information that he sent us that will help give us a little bit more understanding of split tax rate. So these would be pages 8, 9, 10, and 11, I believe.
That's what I got.
Right, in your packets, and 12, sorry. Right. And I would just ask Jim if you'd like to start the discussion off and lead us through some of the things that you thought would be helpful to us.
Okay, let me share my screen if I can find the right place. There we are. There. Share. There. I take it you can see this?
Yes, you can. Thank you.
Can you see my cursor, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, I'll go through, hopefully I can go through this. There we are. What I did is I went into the Division of Local Services data resources and just did some research. And what is shown on the left are 352, there's a lot of overlap, 352 cities. Here's Greenfield in terms of what percent commercial property and what the residential factor is. The residential factor, when it's less than 1, it's a split rate. So with that in mind, what I did is I wanted to focus on, are we okay?
Yes.
I wanted to focus on narrowing things down so we could see cities or towns that were similar to us or comparable to us. So, it was a bit of a process, but it all started here. And once you do that, then glue it up. That's on the right side. And what I'm showing here are the percentages that are less than CIP percentages that are less than Greenfield. So I did basically the same thing with the residential factor versus commercial value, not just the percentage, but the value. And, similar to what I did before, I also looked at commercial values that were less than we were. So that's where we started. And then what I did is I looked at the CIP value in terms of millions and the residential factor for cities or towns that were plus or minus 25% around their CIP value. And, there was a clustering here. So I thought it would make sense to focus on all, and by the way, this is where we are, on all the cities and towns that were kind of like us, at least in terms of CIP value. And what you find, this is that center section of the graph I was talking about, and it shows you all the different municipalities. And what you can see is that the CIP value, they're kind of in line with us. If you go over to the ones that were less than 25% of us, they're way low, probably not representative. And the ones on the right are too high, not representative. So this was really the focus of the analysis, but it took a while to get here. So now that we're here, what do we do? Well, let's do a comparison in terms of CIP value and total value for, this is in billions, by the way. So here we are in, whatever it is, 1.5 billion. And there are a couple of other cities right around us, I would say. You could arguably include a fourth one, but I just looked at the three. So here we have Greenfield, and here we have West Bridgewater and Air, who have split tax rates. And you can see the CIP value, they're kind of comparable to ours. And the population, they're a little shy of where we are. But nonetheless, I think they're probably better than any of the other cities that are represented on this list. And having done that, and finally, you want to take a look at the demographics so you can see whether what we're doing makes any sense in terms of what other cities and towns are doing, and maybe using that comparable data to give us some guidance. So here you see the demographic comparison. Compared to these other towns, we're much larger than they are. Single family tax bill, lower, similar to that, but so you can see the comparisons here. And,
EQV cap.
and I think what you have to do is just mull this over. But what I'd like to call your attention to is the PD. Let me get out of sharing and share a different screen. Hold on a minute. Share content. Okay, and hold on a minute. I wanted to show you a calculator that I came across that will give you the impact of a split tax rate. And I think this is telling. This is pretty straightforward. We looked at Greenfield, no shift. We looked at the percent residential versus commercial, and the current tax levy. Okay. Now, the bottom of this, or towards the bottom, you can take a look at a shift ratio. And what this really says is that the commercial properties will have a tax rate that's 10% greater than the residential. And these are just boundaries. But if you did this, then our commercial properties would bear 28% of the tax burden as opposed to 26%. And accordingly, the residential would bear less of the burden. Well, what does that really mean in terms of impact on tax bills? Well, here we have our current rate. This would be the new rate under that 10% differential I was mentioning. And this is what happens. I mean, you can see all properties $23, and this is what the tax bills would be now. Well, if you implement a split tax rate, what would happen to tax bills? Well, not much. not much here. These are a little more expensive at the higher end of the range. And so I think one of the questions that I ask is, is it really worth going to a split tax rate? I don't know. But I can tell you from the PowerPoint I showed you before, there were a whole bunch of municipalities that had like a 1% or a 2% difference between commercial and residential. And, you know, as you can tell from this, which is a 10% shift, you know, the impact isn't all that great. You know, I mean, yes, the change would be more significant for a commercial property, but in the scheme of things, probably not that much. So you have to really wonder why people only look at 1 or 2% tax shifts. I mean, if you're going to shift taxes, let's make sure that it's worth doing and that you can generate, you know, more money from it. And I think what this tells you is, you know, you're not going to generate that much more, you know, from commercial, and you're not going to take the tax bills down that much for residential. Now, I know there's some people where every cent helps, so you have to weigh that. But at any rate, here's the data, and this calculator is found at this place, and you can do your what ifs however you want to. So that's really all I have to say. Is that okay?
That is wonderful. Thank you. Assessor Aguirre, do you want to add anything to this presentation?
Yeah, I'll say a few things.
Sure.
First of all, I'll compliment Jim Geisman on this. He since he's been elected, he's really dove into some great discussions, and he's got a real great knack for analyzing things. And he's certainly, Jim, good job. You're welcome. I don't have much to add. I'd love to hear your guys' opinion. The one thing that I started doing while he was giving this presentation was I started looking up some of these towns, Ayer, Mass, and Reading, Mass, and West Bridgewater. Anybody know exactly where they are off the top of your heads, or do you have to look it up on the map?
Yes.
I had to look a lot of them up. And so it sort of struck a thought in my head as to, you know, 495 west of Worcester. I just, you know, when I travel, I tell everybody from Massachusetts, and they say Boston, and I say, yep, I'm close enough, right? But Western Mass and Eastern Mass we all know that, right? That was just one thing that came into my head. A lot of times when I compare Greenfield, I try to pull towns like Gardner, and sometimes you try to say Amherst or Northampton, which are very different. But anyway, I just think that's as we evolve this conversation, location, you know. But other than that, great. I mean,
Yeah.
based on pure numbers, pure millions, pure billions, pure, you know, this is a good place to start a conversation.
Excellent. Does anybody from Ways and Means have any questions at this point or comments that they'd like to make on the presentation?
I thought it was fabulous. Oh, sorry for not raising my hand.
That's okay, Jenny.
I thought it was great, and it showed, you know, that it might not make that big of an impact doing it. That was the one takeaway that I had, and I'm glad that you went over it, because when I looked at it by myself, I didn't get as much information as when you explained it to us. So I just wanted to thank you for putting all of that time into that. That's right.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to say, Jim, thank you very much. It was very informative. And as I had said before, on this issue, I mean, if you look at those 3 cities that we use for comparison, and you probably dug a little bit deeper, you would probably find that they have lots of bigger corporations in those cities that could afford to contribute to a tax rate. If you look at them being on 495 corridor, I'm sure there's big corporations there. And just if there's people listening here, I just like to simplify it. If you had a $250,000 house, it's basically $16.66 a week that you would be saving, or that you would have to come up with if you didn't have a split tax rate. So I mean, it's basically $50 a quarter and $16.66 a month. I mean, so we're not talking huge money here if we break it down and simplify it like that, and people are building their budgets to pay for their taxes. It's not a huge difference, folks. And again, I have to say that $200-300 difference on a store owner in downtown Greenfield and rent, if we went with a split tax rate, could be huge to them closing their doors in the course of a year, because sometimes those folks are it could really hurt them. So that's just food for thought when people are thinking about it, and people think that there's a lot of big difference out there. $16.66 a week, not a big difference, folks.
I think that's per month.
Per month.
A month. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to be clear with that. You said per week.
No, I meant per month. Thanks, Joe.
Well, you said week, and then next one you said month. I just
sorry. Yeah. So sorry about that. Thank you. Yeah. So it's been a long day. Lots of numbers today. I'm working on two different big projects. So it's not a huge difference. That's all I had to say on it. Thank you.
Mike, do you have any comments or questions?
I did. Just kind of in rebuttal, not in total rebuttal to what I was just saying, but I believe that, Jim, when you put these together, they had comparable values of commercial property in them, right? So even though we don't have like a really big box store or anything like that that's taken up a lot of, paying taxes, these towns that you selected were comparable in overall commercial property tax payments as ours is. Is that correct?
Yes. What I was doing was looking at the value, both in terms of the value of the commercial property and the percent of the actual tax bill.
Okay.
So, but one thing, I think this whole split tax issue is Henry Lightman in the Recorder did a very good job of explaining this, and I think what we see here is if we want to boost revenues for the city, then the split tax rate, given our commercial base, probably isn't worth the time, effort, political capital, mental energy, whatever. But I think what it really says is we ought to take a look to make sure that all the valuations are, especially on the commercial side, are accurate, are correct. And I can't, I'm too new to this to really understand the whole assessment process. So I can't, take shots at it. But I think there are a number of examples of, based on a different analysis I did, which I can share with you later on. I looked at changes in valuation from 20 to 21 because that's all I had. And what I found were that there were some commercial properties that were given significant, both in dollars and maybe not so significant in percentage. Their assessments went down. I have no explanation. I am sure that RRG does, but I'm saying if you take a look at all of the properties, and I think it's fair to include residential. If you take a look at the changes in valuation and you focus on the ones where the valuations have gone down significantly. And once you get through those, take a look at where the valuations went up. And just, and use that data as a way to think about how you want to set the tax rate and what do you want to do, what you want us as assessors to do. I mean, right now, our RRG, provides the services, they provide the rationale. And, I believe that, they're not lying. But the question is, are the numbers correct? And I can't speak to that. I can only speak to what the numbers say. And that is, there were a number of commercial properties that got significant decreases in their valuation, which may be appropriate, may not, but I'm just, I'm just looking at the outliers.
Liz.
Thank you. Such an excellent job. But the one thing I just want to remind folks, the valuation does not bring in more revenue. It divides the budget. So I just want folks to make sure they realize that. I'm not saying it's, you shouldn't, if something's wrong, you shouldn't correct it. All I'm saying is to keep in mind that it does not bring in more revenue. It divides up the budget, basically.
But doesn't it have an impact on the levy limit?
The valuation?
Yeah.
You have it has an impact on the debt limit. The levy limit can only be with new 2.5 what it was the year before plus new growth. So really the major impact it would have is on our debt limit, which is an equation of EQV.
Yeah. Well, you're the expert here. I'm clearly not.
No, you did excellent, Jim. I was so impressed. It was excellent.
I'm sorry you set your bar so low.
Oh.
But I think you're right. But I think what this does is, our budgets are squeezed, and people want more services, which means they're going to have to pay more money. And the issue is, how does that come about? And how does that come about in a way that if, a stranger would look at one property and what happened to that property, they'd say, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I may disagree with the numbers, but, it kind of makes sense. And when you do that, then, if you're raising the debt limit, then you're raising how much you can spend, and therefore how that gets divvied up, as you say.
Yeah. In a way too. It's always good to be under your, to have room in your debt limit. But we also have policies to make sure we stay within a manageable amount of debt service within our operating budget, which is another conversation, different from assessing. But go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. No, this conversation is great. One thing, Jim, by asking that question, raising our revenue, etc. You're right, Liz. We can spend what we spent last year plus 2.5. And the way to spend more is with new growth. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if we were to build 10 houses, then that's new growth. And if people were to put on 20 decks, that's new growth.
Yep.
And at the same time, part of this discussion is if we were to have more commercial buildings built in our industrial park, that's new growth. And so as we balance, as we continue the discussion, in the past, there's been a lot of arguments against split tax rates because businesses won't want to come here, and maybe that's the case, and maybe it's not. I'm not giving. I haven't thought about that enough to give an opinion. But as we balance this, that could be something, or as we discuss this, that should be something are we getting new growth through commercial? If we did a split tax rate and heavied on the residential and made the commercial people pay more, would we get more growth in commercial? Maybe not. So I'm just trying to be devil's advocate from the opposite side. So anyway, how do we go ahead? Yeah.
Okay.
Or anybody.
So someone who works very hard on this is Director MJ Adams. And, I believe she could give some great insight on this. And she, that's what really the department is about. I'm going to let MJ take over because I'm just going to, but the impact of tax rate and how she is trying to grow the commercial sector in Greenfield.
I think what MJ is doing is really great. But this is a game that's won by inches. And that is, if you capture all of the new growth, that means the building inspection department information is accurate, and it's captured by the assessors, and it's cranked into the calculations. So, maybe the takeaway is let's make sure we're capturing all the new growth we can. And MJ, if you can add to that, that's even more wonderful. And similarly, we ought to take a look at some of these changes in valuations that, on the face of it, look rather large. And when you do both of these things, then you're in a much more favorable financial position, I think, in terms of how much room you have in the debt limit, and and how you can address the increased demand for services by Greenfielders.
MJ, would you like to share some comments with us?
Only to say that I'm here to be all ears and listen. I know that last fall when you were having the conversation about whether or not to consider a split tax rate, you wanted to have a thoughtful conversation, and I'm delighted that you're having it in February rather than in October.
Or at all.
And that said, clearly the split tax rate, economic development professionals have opinions about it up and down the valley and across the state. Clearly, as we're looking to attract growth and new industry in our community, the question does come up about do you have a split tax rate and what's the thinking? So I'm delighted that we're having a conversation about it early. There are some businesses that will expand, that the tax issue isn't that big for them. I mean, we have some local manufacturers who are here right now, who are looking to expand, and they tell us they want to expand in Greenfield. They find the land, and we're working hard to find that land and create those opportunities so that we can keep and grow what we have and invite new folks in. So I don't have a firm opinion on it, except that I'm here to listen to the concerns. And Jim, your presentation was excellent, by the way. I really appreciated that, especially as we look at peer communities that have similar characteristics. I think that's an important thing to look at, because where it's important to compare ourselves to our peers and what they do. And I've actually started to do some research up and down the Pioneer Valley, because a business that's locating here in Greenfield is likely looking up and down the I-91 corridor and not so much out to Air or West Bridgewater. So thank you. Thanks for taking it up early.
Our pleasure. Is there any other questions, concerns, comments that we have for our assessors?
I did have a question.
Okay.
On the so I'm looking at this chart. How is the EQV per capita configured? This is a term that I'm not familiar with, and I'm seeing it's a very big disparity between ours and pretty much everybody else on there. So I was just wondering what that factor is.
Liz is the expert.
The value of those houses in those areas, you can imagine, are much higher,
right,
per the population. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
The other one that I like to look at is income per capita. I also usually pull that in because
Right.
I think that's also comparable.
That's what I was noticing, was that the income for even, let's just say, us to West Bridgewater, their income was 60% more than ours, but their tax bill was 25% higher. So it's those are kind of like, pretty big differences between how much they're making and how much is being attributed to the taxes in their area.
Yep. As Joe was sort of pointing out, 495
Yeah, right.
and east. And Air is, and Reading is, and
Yeah,
West Bridgewater is.
every single one of those is east. Every single one of those counties.
There's not much left going west.
Right.
Assessor Gary, are you all set? Did I see your hand up?
No, it's Mike. You just brought up other great ideas that just got my mind spinning. I think it's interesting how things out east and out west, the numbers are so different, but it's like the cost to run a dump truck might be pretty similar. Marlo could attest to, or the cost to buy lumber is, I mean, it's really it's like we live in two different worlds, Western Mass and Eastern Mass. But you did bring up a good point, though, that they do have some similar numbers. So it kind of opened my eyes. Like, you go out to some of these towns and you think you're getting closer to Boston, but you're in a really rural area. It's like, I thought we were closer to the city, Greenfield, USA, right? Versus Air. So no, you really just get my mind spinning on some of these things. But there's more conversation, I imagine. One thought I had as I was coming into this meeting is just the fact that I don't know how close we are, but I hope we're close to getting a new chief assessor. And just as a person who's kind of overseeing obviously how the office operates, I just really hope that happens soon so that they can also be part of this conversation, I guess is where I was going. There's some great things coming out, but somebody like Jim, who has an analytical idea and he brings that to the table, and I bring maybe some management to the table and some knowledge of the neighborhoods, etc. But somebody that really knows assessing, I mean, that's who's really going to be a crucial person for this conversation. So just hoping we get closer to that point.
Okay, well, thank you all very much. Jim, thank you for your presentation.
That was good.
It was great. I love it when we have visual aids to help us. That always makes more sense. If there's no more questions for our assessors, I think our presentation this evening is complete. And hopefully we'll see you again next month with more questions and brainstorm for more ideas.
And if you want to ask questions in the interim, that's a good thing.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I would like to add to that too. We're meeting twice a month. If there is any, we're shorthanded in our office, as you guys know. Jim, we're willing to do what we can do to help with this conversation. Certainly we can show up next month and just kind of wing it, which I think is okay. I mean, I think we're getting ideas out there, right? But if there's any guidance or, the first meeting we had as Ways and Means, there were some talking points that we did not necessarily analyze. Liz said maybe to determine what percentage of towns, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
We certainly don't want to show up, if this is okay with you guys, fine. There's just not a lot of guidance as to where to go with this, but Jim will probably find something to analyze for you guys for the next meeting and go from there, I guess.
Well, there were some points that were made at our last meeting, and I'll dig them out of my notes and maybe send them off to you, and then you can we can all brainstorm and we can ask questions around those points. I'll send them to all the committee members as well.
Okay, great.
Ginny, did you have a question for us? I didn't want to ignore you.
I just had a topic maybe for next month, would be our new growth and how we actually go about finding our new growth and how we are doing comparatively. So I was going to put that in an email, but I'll say it now.
Okay.
I think that's an excellent. I think that's an excellent idea.
Thank you so much.
Great.
But Jim and I will go learn about it, and then we'll. Just kidding.
That's perfectly fine. We like that. We like that.
On the
All right.
first,
Well,
I'm sorry, on the first slide, there's a URL to the Department of, the Division of Local Services. And
Yes.
that is a treasure trove of data if you want to go in and see what's going on.
all right.
Okay.
They all-
Excellent.
Thank you,
Okay,
everybody.
thank you so much. Everybody can run away home. We only have a few more items of business, but I do again thank you all so very much for being with us. Thank
Great
you.
work, you guys.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Okay, we're going to move on. We just have a few more items of business. The next item is formation of an ad hoc committee to discuss the collection of additional funds for the construction of the new fire station. There is some background paperwork. I know that this is on our agenda for tomorrow evening. The full council will consider or weigh in on this. Is there anybody who wants to discuss this at the moment, or would you rather wait until our meeting in front of full council?
I think it's always a great idea to bring it up in a smaller group, Chris. Maybe you could, Councilor Forgy. Did you have, you were instrumental in this. I think there's, I don't know if all three councilors are here that are going to be on that. I believe you and Councilor Ricketts. And is it
Councilor Healy was.
Yeah, Councilor Healy, I don't think is here this evening. I did see Penny online. What I wanted to, the other thing I wanted to mention is that Councilor Jarvis is also the council representative to the full building project as well. So he has also been keeping the council apprised. The rationale behind this comes from the event, and Councilor Jarvis can jump in here anytime he wishes. Comes from the event of the construction on the fire station and the budgetary concerns, particularly the fact of the increase in materials and other items that are needed to get this fire station built. And there was a great amount of support out in the community for seeing this fire station succeed well. One of the suggestions was that if we formed an ad hoc committee, this committee could discuss amongst themselves ways in which there might be additional funding. They could also discuss what, looking for citizen involvement in maybe fundraising or something like that. So it is on the agenda for tomorrow evening. The idea is that I feel the ad hoc committee doesn't want to reinvent the wheel, because I think the building committee has been doing its due diligence and been doing a really good job. We only want to be helpful when it comes to the money piece. And if that's basically it at this point, if people have other comments about it, I'm not sure how active the group is going to be or how long it's going to take. Could be a few meetings just for discussion purposes and report back out to the council. Councilor Jarvis.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I know. One thing to keep in mind is that we'll have our. I haven't printed up our minutes from the last meeting just because it's been chaos.
Yes.
There wasn't really much to report from the last fire department meeting anyways. It was pretty quick. And so I know Chief Strand, I see some letters going, some information, letters going around and concerns about having other people present, is looking for grants for some of the stuff that was excluded. You know, and just kind of so this committee can follow along a little bit. Is the problem is our supply. I mean, we looked at one roof structure that was a little bit less expensive, and they didn't have 100% of the components. So we looked at Patrico and Ross looked at the next components of the roof system. They didn't have 100%. So we ended up at like the fourth vendor that had 100%. Well, they were a little bit more pricey, but they had 100% of what we needed. So that's kind of like where we are in some of the construction costs, and it's construction costs all the ways around when you're doing projects. That's what we're running into, and that's what the fire department, and that's what the city's running into is the product and demand. You don't want to get into a situation where you're going with a less expensive system and you don't have 100% of the components, because at the end of construction, you need 100% of the components of part A to get to part B and so forth. So it's kind of complicated, and that's what we're running up against, and that's what we run up against in any kind of construction. I mean, we ordered doors in September. We won't have them until April for this one project. So that's what we're running into. So we have plywood up on a multi-million-dollar project on doorways. So that's what we're running into. So as suggested, we should, I think it was Liz and the mayor and everybody, before we know what our final shortfall is going to be, we need to get all of our RFQs back, and see where the money falls, to see where our shortfalls are going to be. So I know I sent that information out when in the last email when the RFPs and RFQs are going to go out, and we should expect them back. So I'll keep on trying to keep people posted as much as I can, if there's anything new to report. And if you have some free times, what do we meet? The second and fourth Thursday at 4:00. That's our calendars are getting full, and they're going to get fuller here with the next go around coming up pretty soon. They always the fun part of the year with
budget
and budget. So filling in our calendars. That's all I had to get. And if anybody has any questions, please forward them to me. I will get the answers either from the designer, from the project manager, or from the chief, or whomever. So just forward them over to me. And if you hear stuff in the rumor mill that you think is devastating, let me clarify. Send me the email so I can clarify them for you, so you're not getting misinformation that seems to be floating out there sometimes. Okay, that's it.
Any other comments? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Jarvis, for that. We appreciate it. The last on our agenda tonight is the capital budget report for the fiscal year 2023, which I'm going to defer to Liz and say, my understanding is that this will be out next month. Is that correct?
Well, it'll be for the next committee chair. She'll have the information so that it can be discussed at next month for first reading.
Okay, excellent. For our newer members, this is a process that starts actually back in November. The Capital Committee, which is the finance chair, the school superintendent or representative. At this point, it was Amy Peretti, who is the school board chair, and Jean Wall. We met with the mayor and with Liz, and we discussed the wish list, everything that everybody put in, all the lovely items that they were interested in. For the most part, we were interested in seeing them happen as well. I do know that what happens between that particular piece. And when it comes to us in March, it will have been vetted by the mayor with all her department heads. And I'm sure that there will be some differences in what was presented to the Capital Committee versus what we see coming out to the Ways and Means and then to the Finance Committee. So we're looking forward to starting that process, right, Ed? Right, Janine? Right, Mike? Hang on to your seats, because we go quite quickly and everything gets very confusing. But just to let you know that we're headed for that next. And again, any questions, concerns, whatever, please send them out to myself or to Liz. If you have any money questions or things like that. Okay, is there any other business this evening? All right, so our next meeting is going to be March 15th, 2022, 5:30 p.m. at Johnson Community Center or via WebEx if required. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Thank you,
Trevor.
Samantha.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, good night, everybody. Thank you all so very much for being here. Thank you for
Night.
attending.
Thank you.